Whiskey is the water of life.
Whiskey is distilled and matured on the island of Ireland.
Whiskey is the extraordinary story of our distillery and our craft. Whiskey is matured in wooden casks for a minimum of 3 years.
Whiskey is my life's work for over 45 years.
Whiskey for me is starting a conversation. It's an icebreaker.
Many's a good moment has been shared with a glass of whiskey in our hand.
Whiskey is discovering secrets passed down through generations.
Whiskey is Irish character distilled in a glass.
Whiskey is Barrel Club Midleton Distillery.
And we're live. Well, the red light's on, so that means there's no going back. A very warm welcome to Barrel Club Midleton Distillery and to our very first virtual tasting as part of the club, exclusive only to you, our members. We're thrilled you've joined us this evening, not just for tonight, but for the year or so ahead. We have some wonderful whiskies and people for you to meet and explore this evening. We're coming to you live from the cooperage here at Midleton Distillery in County Cork. Very fitting given the theme of our first Barrel Club drop. Your packs should have reached you by now, vital really, as we learn in a little bit more detail about the role and influence Spanish oak has played on these great whiskies before. So it should be a fun next hour, hour and a half or so. We'll see how we get on with time. We hope that you've managed to resist temptation and you've set aside some whiskies for this evening's tasting. And if you've already enjoyed responsibly, of course, the miniature samples we've sent you, then you can enjoy a tasting anyway with a little glass of yellow spot. And if you've finished the yellow spot, well, good luck, there's no more we could do. We would encourage you to take a good sip of water all the way through. We're not expecting you to drink all the samples that we've sent you. My name is John Carroll. I hope we find you in great spirits this evening. I'm part of the visitor experience team here at the distillery in Midleton and also Jameson Distillery in Bow Street in Smithfield in Dublin, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. Most likely asking some very silly questions that you guys are used to me by now with our very fantastic panel we've assembled for you this evening. 2 blenders and our master distiller. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Deirdre O'Carroll, who's a blender here at Midleton Distillery. Deirdre, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule. Tell us a little bit about you and your role here at Midleton Distillery.
Hi John, hi everyone. I started my journey here in Irish Distillers a little over 9 years ago. I started on the Jameson Engineering Graduate Programme. After that, I held a number of positions in the distillery itself before making my way to maturation, where I worked closely with Kevin O'Gorman for the last 4 years. As of January this year, I'm both honoured and delighted to announce that I've been appointed blender.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic news.
Joining the already existing blending team with Dave alongside me here and Billy Lighton, both of whom I'm sure you're very familiar with.
And Billy's actually tuned in, so hi Billy.
Hi Billy. So my role, as you can imagine, the sensory aspect of my role is extremely important. We strive to ensure that the products that you know and love, such as Jameson, Redbreast, Green Spot, are consistent year on year, albeit the ingredients, for want of a better word, can vary. We also work very closely with maturation or with innovation and marketing to ensure that the products that we bring out to the world are very innovative, and we really rely on the innovation that happens here in Midleton Distillery, the marketing or the maturation complex, and also the people of Midleton.
Dream job.
You said it.
Part of the dream team. And another member of that dream team is with us, familiar to some, Mr. Dave McCabe. Dave, thanks a mil also for joining us. I know you're flat to the mat at the moment. You've had a great journey with Irish distillers so far, working on both sides of the barley gates, as we call them here at Midleton Distillery, only a stone's throw from the cooperage. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, that's right, John. I started here in 2010 in what we call the old Midleton Distillery. And from there, I helped establish the Irish Whisky Academy, which is like what you'd call an educational centre of excellence for Irish whisky. Where
It's class. If you haven't been, you need to visit. It's
pretty good
incredible.
now. And there we would have trained staff, but also members of the public would have attended it, and whisky writers, whisky journalists. And basically I would have gone through the whole whisky making process with them, from raw materials right up to the bottling of the final product, taking them up to the main distillery through the barley gates, which is the kind of the border.
Over the border?
Over the fence. And during that time, I suppose I spent more time traveling as well with that job and attending events with Billy. And kind of in 2017, Billy took me under his wing, so to speak, where I kind of served as an apprentice for a year, learning the tools of the trade when it comes to blending. And Billy kept me on, and I've been working in blending ever since. And it's great now to have Dee as part of the team, because we're busy out with all the different brands, as you can imagine. And as Deirdre said, you know, it comes to quality and consistency, and that's from a sensory point of view. But as well, you know, we have to manage what the future expectations are of our brands, and a lot of the work is managing our stock and making sure we have the right amount of barrels with the right spirits in them for the future.
So no pressure, no weight on your shoulders whatsoever.
None, no pressure at all.
Come here, thanks a mil for dropping in to see us this evening. And last but certainly not least, delighted to introduce our Master Distiller, Mr. Kevin O'Gorman, who hand-packed all of your packs which arrived during the week. So big thanks, Kevin. Only joking, of course. It's great to have you here this evening. Kevin, you were appointed as our Master Distiller back in June of last year. Very memorable 12, 18 months for the world in general, but for you in particular in your new role, what a great start. And maybe tell us about some of your highlights over the last 12 months.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. And everybody's very welcome to the Coopers this evening. It's great to have people online. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's been a very eventful sort of 18 months for everybody, but in particular for myself. June last year, 2020, I was appointed to the role of Master Distiller. And that was an incredible honour. It really was. It was an incredible occasion.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And I suppose really, I suppose to give people maybe a context before that, I joined Midleton in 1998 as a distiller working for Barry Crockett for a number of years. Then I moved on to maturation and vatting and warehousing and cask management, and took over as head of maturation in 2007, 2008 when Brendan Monks retired. And that then brought me up to June last year, and the appointment to the role of Master Distiller. So really, I suppose from July last year, I had to get stuck into the job straight away. There was no sitting around, and the first task really was to start preparing for Midleton Very Rare 21, believe it or not. And
again, no pressure. Your first project.
Yeah.
Straight in.
But again, I had loads of help here in Midleton as well. But that was, I suppose, just the whole process of the selection of the casks. Coming up with prototypes, and then the final selection decision on the Midleton Very Rare 21 was an amazing journey. It really was. You have the selection of the finest grain and pot whiskies in Midleton, and whilst it's a long process, it really is. It's just so rewarding. It's brilliant.
And especially then to see your name.
Yeah, and that came then in February. We had the actual launch of MVR 21, and you actually got the bottle and your name was on it. And I suppose it just sank in then really when you saw the bottle and your name on it. I know it was Dylan and Kieran on the marketing team. They showed me the first bottle. And yeah, that was special, I have to say. It really was.
Proud moment for the family?
Yeah, pretty much. So that was a big highlight. But I think the rest of the year, there's been lots of other highlights. I think if I look back to November last year, when we brought the final Blue Spot, and the whole Spot family was reunited, I think that was a special part as well. You know, we had the green, we had the yellow, we had the red, and I suppose the final piece of the jigsaw was the blue. And we all looked forward to that so much for many, many years, and it just came full circle. So that was special. I think the Silent Distillery, I mean, that was incredible. Chapter 2, just to be part of that. and to showcase the whiskies from the old distillery that is now silent, and the sense of history and time was incredible. That was really, really memorable. And I could go on, but maybe I should mention the Mulberry as part of Method and Madness. That was really good as well, just to highlight the work that's gone on in Midleton. So I could go on, John, but
listen,
there were some of the highlights.
Congratulations, what a year, and it's a difficult year, so many highlights, and I know in terms of even the future, what's coming down the line, some exciting things as well. So listen, guys, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And Deirdre, Kevin and Dave will be taking you through this evening's tastings of 4 whiskies, which have been influenced in different ways through maturation in Spanish oak casks. If you have any questions during the session, please connect with us through the chat section, and I'll put your query to the panel as we go. And we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end also. And if we do run out of time and anything is left unanswered, fear not, we're going to collate and circulate a Q&A over the coming days. Now, as I mentioned, we're gathered here this evening in the natural habitat of our master cooper, Mr. Ger Buckley. And as we didn't want them to see what we've done with the place, we've given them the night off. But we did catch up with Ger earlier in the week to tell us a little bit about the incredible journey of European oak from tree to barrel. And we're going to hear from Ger now.
Whiskey to me is the oak, the trees, the forest, the barrels. My name is Ger Buckley. I'm a 5th generation cooper working here in Midleton Distillery for over 45 years. Here in the distillery, I use the same tools that have been passed on from one cooper to the next. When we choose our wood for making our whiskey, we look to the oak tree. And generally we are looking at trees that are over 120 years old. American oak, or Quercus alba, as it is known in Latin, is the predominant wood used for aging whiskey across the world. But Quercus roba, or European oak, as we commonly refer to it, plays a very important role in influencing our whiskey here in Midleton Distillery. The sherry butt at 500 litres capacity is considerably larger than the American oak barrel at 200 litres. And unlike the American oak casks, which are charred on the inside, sherry casks are toasted over wood-burning fires for up to 40 minutes at a time. Our oak is sourced predominantly from Galicia and Cantabria in the north of Spain. Once harvested, the oak is left to dry in the open for over 18 months. The sawmill we use is in Borrala, just outside Lugo in northern Spain. It's on this Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage walk. It's the same forest the Romans were harvesting oak from over 2,000 years ago. And we're still using the same roads that the Romans used. So it's a long tradition of harvesting oak from that area. Now I'm going to get a little bit technical, so bear with me. The toasting of the barrels allows the wood to interact with the spirit to impart colour and flavour. We call the toasting thermal degradation, as it breaks down the wood polymers. The flavours you would typically derive from the sherry butt depend on the sherry or fortified wine that you would put into the cask. So a wide spectrum of flavours can be imparted by different types of sherry to create our whiskies. Once the casks have been seasoned with sherry or fortified wine for 2 years, they're shipped from Spain here to Midleton Distillery to be filled with our distilled spirit to make the whiskey.
Amazing. Always great to hear from Ger and see him in action, and a really nice insight into the journey of oak from the north of Spain to the south of Ireland here in Midleton. Now, our cask selection is such an important part of our production process. And Kevin, we've got a very strong and long-standing relationship, in particular with the Antonio Paez Labato bodega in Jerez in Spain. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, sure, John. I suppose our relationship with Antonio Paez and the team in Jerez probably goes back almost 40 years now. My predecessor in maturation, Brendan Monks, He was probably first to set up the contact with Antonio Paez. And I suppose to give a little bit of context to that, probably the late 70s, early 80s, I think there was a realization that the quality of the cask, the quality of the oak, the quality of the seasoning process was crucial to the flavour of the whiskey and producing a quality whiskey. And really Brendan and the team in Midleton started working on that whole wood management process in Midleton, and they started building up relationships with cooperages around the world. And one of those was Antonio Paez, and Brendan set that up from word go. And Antonio Paez, he's commissioned by us to actually make the cask, the sherry cask, and then he's also commissioned to send them out to bodegas for seasoning with Oloroso sherry. One of those bodegas is Lostau, which we'll be talking about later on, and he's his own bodegas as well. So I think the whole attention to detail with Antonio and the team is just phenomenal. I remember my first trip out there probably over 20 years now, it's a long time ago, but I was just so impressed with the way they carry their business and the attention to detail, the quality, and it's fantastic. I suppose the other thing though is that they're just such a nice family to work with. They're part of our team here, and lots of the projects that we've done over the last number of years, they wouldn't have been possible without the help of Antonio and also the guys, the sawmills up in Madabar, which Ger mentioned there as well. So they're really part of our team, even though they're far away in Jerez de la Frontera in Spain. They really are a core part of what we do, and it's great to work with them.
Well, just to mention, I think everything you've mentioned there is mutual, and you mentioned they're far away, but we're going to bring them a little bit closer to us this evening. We caught up with Paco and a couple of the family members during the week, and for you guys joined in, we're going to play a short video now. But like all things done virtually over the last 18 months or so, the sound quality is a little bit patchy, but we hope that you enjoy hearing from Paco and the team. So let's cross over to Jerez in Spain.
Hello, my name is Esperanza, and I'm part of the third generation of the family business. Well, as you know, Antonio Paez Lovato Cooperage was founded by our grandfather, Antonio Paez Lovato, in 1946. As I said before, we are part of the third generation with other members of the family as well.
I myself have been working with the company for 32 years now, and when I entered the company back in 1989, Irish distillers had been a customer of this company for many years. So I could say that perhaps our relationship goes back more than 40 years. And we have been, supplying Irish distillers with good quality casks for 4 decades now. I say that we are very proud of the contribution that our casks make to the finalizing the process of the mature whiskey in Ireland, in Irish distillers. I would say that we are more friends than a typical customer-supplier relationship. Thanks God, we are now friends, and that is quite important.
We find our Spanish oak in the north of Spain, in Galicia, Asturias. We have 8 suppliers working for us at the moment. All of our wood is naturally air dry in our patios, and we check and control the humidity and move the wood from time to time, trying to get about 15-16% of humidity in the space. And for us, the natural air dry and the toasting is the most important part of the process, because the tannin transformation is keeping to the whiskey, translating to the whiskey or the components. So for us, it's really, really important.
Our main focus always has been quality, quality and quality, better than quantity. We are not interested in producing casks like in a candy factory, you know. The cask making, the cooperage, is a craft. And we try to keep it like as that, a craft. The man is important. We are not just pressing buttons. We are just not using machines. It is the man who makes the cask, with the help of machinery, of course. But even nowadays, a cask is a craft. Is like a very expensive piece of furniture. You know, that's it. Your Master Cooper, McCabe, indeed, it is wonderful. I think, if I can recall it clearly, is a 5th generation of Coopers. Yeah? So it is something that it's important that it doesn't disappear. Well, his assistant, Killian was working with us for nearly a year. I think it was 9 months or 10 months, just trying to learn how we make our own casks here. So I think that it is something that is important, and in a couple of years, 100% of all our production for, I would say, all our customers, and mainly for Irish distillers, is going to be EEFC certified material, coming from sustainable forestries and forests, and that is something that is quite important. I think that is the main trend now in all the market, sustainability.
Palpable, isn't it? That great bond and relationship, and it's wonderful to hear from Paco and the team firsthand. Just a super bond between our two companies. Now, just to mention, we are following very strict safety procedures in order to bring this broadcast to you, making sure that everyone involved is safe at all times. Also, a reminder, stick in some questions or commentary as we go along, and we'll put it to the guys. We've got a screen here, so as your questions come in, we'll be able to pop over as we go. So let's get started with our first whiskey tasting this evening, and we're going to begin with Method and Madness Single Grain Virgin Oak. And Deirdre, you're going to take us through.
Tell you a little bit about it.
Please,
yeah. It's a great whiskey to start off with. First, let me tell you a little bit about the brand. Method and Madness was launched in 2017 from our innovation hub, that is the micro distillery. It really gained its inspiration from the infamous Shakespearean quote, "Though this be madness, yet there is method in it." And it really is the next generation of Irish spirit. And we're harnessing information, knowledge, experience from the masters and the generations of people who have worked at Midleton Distillery, which is in essence the method, and coupling this or combining this with the curiosity, the intrigue, the creativity of the apprentices coming up the ranks, which is the madness. And for me, no other question, a simple question sums up this brand in its entirety, and it's why not? So if for the likes of the three of us, when we're sitting around a table and many more people in Midleton Distillery, if there's a question, let's try this, the answer is always, let's give it a go.
Yeah. It's a very
why not?
disruptive approach, isn't it?
Yes.
Brilliant.
So if we take it to the whiskey itself, you might be wondering what single grain means. And single refers to the distillery itself, and everything is made on site in Midleton here. Grain refers to the type of spirit, the type of whiskey that we use, and obviously that's produced here in Midleton. grain whiskey is made up of cereals or a mash bill of malted barley and maize. It's triple distilled in our column stills, and it gives us a spirit that is fragrant and floral and quite delicate in nature. We've decided to put this for the first portion of its life in an ex-bourbon barrel. And what I mean by that, it's an American oak barrel. It was used once and has bourbon in it. The bourbon was removed and sent directly to us here in Midleton, and we put our grain whiskey in it. After a number of years, the flavour contributions that we get from this barrel are vanilla, butterscotch, caramel, toffee, that kind of flavour notes. After 7 years, even though this was a perfectly good whiskey, this is where the madness came, we decided to recask this lovely whiskey and put it into one of these virgin Spanish oak casks beside me. And the flavour contributions that we'd get from this type of cask is nuttiness, dried fruit, and also it's very high in tannins, so that will contribute greatly to the colour, but it also adds an astringency to the whiskey, but the grain whiskey that we've put into it really complements this astringency. So without further ado, we might give this a nose. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So straight off the bat, I'm just met with pencil shavings, and then that would be very indicative of the virgin Spanish oak. And there are definite undertones of caramel and toffee, and that would have been from its start of its life in the ex-bourbon barrel. And then if you nose it ever so slightly, there's a lovely rose petal aroma. And what I love particularly about this whiskey is all the flavour contributions are very indicative. So we have the pencil shaving from the Spanish oak. We have those lovely caramel and toffee undertones from the ex-bourbon barrel, and this lovely grain, floral, rose petal note from the grain whiskey. And they come nicely together, but we can...
Special, isn't it?
Very lovely.
Can we taste?
Yes. And straight away there's that wood contribution there, and that's very much from the Spanish oak. But there's a nice zestiness to it, a citrus note in the form of grapefruit, and a lovely, long-lasting finish with just this tiny hint of clove spice.
Yeah, I think for me, we spoke earlier on in the video about the Madabar cooperage and the sawmills and Antonio Payas and the cooperage. Those pencil shavings, the toasted oak and stuff. It just comes to the fore, but it reminds me so much of the cooperage in Antonio Payas in Jerez, and also the sawmills in Madabar. It just comes that sort of oak and that pencil shavings. It's very distinctive.
Now this is between 7 and 9 years old, and it's 46% ABV. So at this point, if you want to add a touch of water.
Can I ask you a silly question? I did promise that at the start.
At the start.
What is the story with adding a little bit of water? Because some people, it's sacrilegious if you put anything into whiskey. Other people swear by it. So maybe for people at home, you might be able to explain.
It's completely everyone's preference, but I think with this particular whiskey, it really, if you just nose it, it really dials down that wood spice and really elevates that fragrant floral note from the grain. And it's a lot more fragrant and floral, and that wood spice, is downplayed a tiny bit when you add a bit of water. It just really opens up the whiskey. But again, it's everyone's preference.
It certainly becomes more floral, I would say. That sort of floral note coming from the grain certainly comes to the fore when you add the water, definitely.
And what's interesting as well, being a Method of Madness offering, is we're very used to making grain and very used to storing it in ex-bourbon barrels. But the mad part really was taking what we consider, as Dee said, light, floral, fragrant, and essentially delicate versus the type of pot still characters that we typically make, to take that and put it into unseasoned, heavy oak influencing type of barrel. We were thinking that maybe there might be kind of a misbalance or a sort of too much of an oak influence overpowering the grain. But, as we're talking here, floral notes, a rose type of characteristic coming through, along with the toasted oak. You can see the grain is still shining through. So it's kind of through the method of madness of knowing what we can do and trying something that we're not sure about. It paid off, I think, very much so.
Yeah, brilliant. And just in terms of that experimentation, what's been the most difficult or challenging wood type that you guys have worked with to date?
Do you want to take that one, Dave?
There's a few, I suppose you could say, particularly under the Method Madness brand, because that's where we're really pushing the boundaries, as we can often say, and trialing with different wood types. So, we did work with chestnut a lot at the beginning, but, it's very a giving type of wood. We knew about it being used in the wine industry, so we weren't too surprised to see that it worked quite well. But I suppose where we came to a point of lots of trials and errors was with the wild cherry. It was a type of wood we had never worked with before, and didn't know what to expect from it, essentially. So when we got them in and filled them, the influence was so impactful very quickly that we had to look at maybe, okay, let's get in more, maybe leave it for a bit shorter of a time, blend some with the old. So it was really a big blending exercise, you could say, to get the balance right with that wood, because we just didn't know what to expect with it. So that was one of the bigger challenges, I think, from the wood side of things.
And in terms of Method of Madness as a portfolio or as a range, what's coming down the line in terms of new product in the pipeline?
Oh, John, I can't tell you that. Yeah, look, we have lots going on in terms of Method of Madness, and I suppose that's one of the, it's the beauty of the brand, and that you can try different things. And we've lots and lots in warehouse, different wood finishes, different distillates, different distillate styles, different charring, different toasting techniques. So there is a long pipeline down there. It's great. In fact, yesterday, sort of hot off the press, John, we released, I suppose, our first whiskey that was distilled in the micro distillery. So we established a micro distillery on site here back in 2015, which was really the launch pad of Method of Madness, the brand. So it is a micro distillery on site. It's, the very, very small pot stills. The wash still is about 2,500 litres, and the faint still and spirit still are about 1,500 litres, so they're quite small in comparison to our main distillery. So it is truly a micro distillery. And the first distillate distilled there, Catherine Conlon was the distiller back in 2016, actually came to fruition yesterday, where we launched a rye and malt. So it's a 60% rye, 40% malt mash bill, double distilled. And we were just so happy with the flavour profile, it's great.
And I think we have a bottle. And actually, I think we're feeling extremely generous this evening, Deirdre, aren't we? And we've got one bottle of that Method of Madness rye and malt, which, as Kevin mentioned, was unveiled here at Midleton Distillery last evening to give away to one of our lucky Barrel Club members tuned in this evening. So, Deirdre, we can't make this easy. Make this easy. So come up with a tricky little question here.
Okay.
What do we think?
How many barrels are currently maturing on both or maturation sites in Midleton and Dungoran to the nearest number?
Okay, so combined.
Combined.
So we're looking for total numbers live. You guys can press a button and get that number, so we will know very shortly what that number is. And to be in with a chance to win, simply pop your answer in the chat box, and please do ask some questions. We'll come, and the closest guess to the actual number will win that bottle. And it's a lovely prize, I think not released until the 20th of September. It's going to be with a retail price of €95.
Yep.
So what a nice little prize. So do pop in we see some in there already. Ben Lucy, 2 million. John Lane, 2.5 million. Michael Lee, 1,000. We've got 6 million, 1.7, 2. Oh my word, this is fantastic. So we will announce our winner a little bit right before we wrap. I think we've got questions coming in, so we're going to take one, guys, if that's okay. We got Connor Carmody. I'm not sure where Connor's tuning in from. Great job so far, guys. Very enjoyable. Thank you very much, Connor. We're at the beginning of an innovation phase within Irish whiskey, or are we at the beginning of an innovation phase within Irish whiskey, or is there a limited amount of experimental options, i.e. limited amount of cask types, grains, etc., etc.? Great question.
Yeah, I think it says, are we at the beginning of the innovation phase? Yes, there is a huge amount of innovation, but I think we need to pay heed to what went before us as well, because if I think of Midleton Distillery and all the people that have gone before us, they've done a huge amount of innovation, over 20, 30, 40 years, to be honest. And, a lot of the whiskies that we've launched over the last number of years, I think of Blue Spot and the Spot extensions and all that work was done 10, 15, 20 years ago. In fact, the Madeira casks used in Blue Spot, we sourced those over 20 years ago. So we have to say, look, there was a lot of innovation going on in the past as well. But yes, looking to the future, an incredible array of different innovations in Ireland at the moment. It's wonderful to see it. And there's just so many permutations. I think the question is, is there a limit? And I don't think there is. I mean, if you look at Midleton itself, in terms of the different distillate styles, in terms of the different wood finishes, age, you've just a huge array of permutations, and it's really limitless. And I think it'll go on, and it's great.
And then, of course, with our micro distillery a stone's throw from where we are tonight, that's a perfect testing hub for us.
Yeah,
brilliant. Deirdre, thanks a million. That was fantastic. We're now going to move across to yourself, Kevin. You're going to introduce Yellow Spot and a few minutes Jameson Triple Triple, both of which use Malaga and sherry in the blend.
Yeah,
so I think you're going to start with Yellow
just
Spot.
Maybe Yellow Spot. So we'll just move on to Yellow Spot, and really, I suppose any conversation around the tasting of Yellow Spot has to involve, the Mitchell brothers in Dublin. They're such a core part of the whole Spot range. Just to give a little bit of history, not to bore people too much, but I think the history is important with the Spot range. Mitchell and Sons, they set up in Dublin in 1805 in Grafton Street. And they used to sell sort of teas and scones and nice things like that. And then, I suppose, as the years went on, they started importing wine casks and fortified wine casks from around Europe. And what they found was that they had a surplus of these casks when they emptied them of the wine. And they were there, well, what do we do with all these wine casks? So in 1887, they started into the bonding business, whereby they would send their empty casks up to Bow Street, for example, John Jameson, on a horse and cart back then. John Jameson would fill those casks with their distillate. Then they would bring it back down to their cellars in Fitzwilliam Lane, and they would store them underground in those cellars and leave them mature, right? And then over the years, what happened was they developed this practice of putting a daub of paint on the cask to indicate the aging potential, right? So, for example, Green Spot was 10-year-old, Blue Spot was 7-year-old, Red Spot was 15, and Yellow Spot was 12-year-old. So that's where the Spot came from, putting a daub of paint. And in fact, to this day, up in the Bond area, we still put a daub of paint on our Oloroso sherry butts and our larger cask types. So
simple but effective.
Yes, some of these casks probably have a daub of paint somewhere.
On the back,
there's blue on the back. There's blue on the back.
So that practice still goes on today. So that's where the name came from, and the link between ourselves and Mitchell's is really, really strong. And what happened then really was that sort of from the 20s onwards, Irish whiskey went through a difficult time and it was in decline. And what happened in probably 1950s, the Blue Spot, Yellow Spot, and Red Spot actually disappeared. And I think the last price list that we have from the Mitchells, where they were all together, I think was 1954. Yeah. And after that, then they basically disappeared. So all that was left was Green Spot to carry the flag. So then I suppose, late maybe 2009, 2010, an Irish distiller's colleague was in the Little Museum of Dublin, and he spotted an intact bottle of Yellow Spot with the old label, the old bottle design. And I suppose that sparked the idea, wouldn't it be brilliant to bring back the Yellow Spot, a reimagined Yellow Spot? Obviously, we couldn't recreate exactly what it was like 50, 60, 70 years ago, but reimagine it. And we started working immediately with the Mitchells, looked up their ledgers, their logbooks, what kind of cask they were using. And, from those logbooks and from the ledgers, we could establish that, Malaga casks were used. So then in Midleton, we took it back and we started working on the makeup of Yellow Spot. So what we have here, which we launched in 2012, We have a single pot still whiskey, okay, which means that it was a cereal mix of malted barley and barley. It was triple distilled in copper pot stills. It was matured in a range of different types of casks, all in the one site here in Midleton. That's the definition of a single pot still whiskey. And we have 3 different cask types here. We have American barrels, we have Oloroso sherry, and we have Malaga casks. Okay, so this is where the Malaga cask comes in. So what we'll do is we'll just take I know people are out there keen to get a taste of it. So as I say, it's 12-year-old minimum single pot still. Now there is older whiskey, that's the minimum age. 3 types of casks. And I suppose the Malaga casks are sort of very, very interesting because in that region of Spain, in Malaga, there's a number of regions where they grow this, you know, the Palomino grape, the Pedro Jimenez grape, and Muscatel. But for Malaga wines, you have to use Pedro Jimenez or Muscatel. And in this one, it's a Pedro Jimenez grape. Okay. And some of those grapes are sun-dried, about 33% are sun-dried, and that really enhances the sweetness of the Malaga wine. So what we do is we get Antonio Paez to make our casks. They're 500 litres. He sends those down to Malaga. They then fill them up with their Malaga wine, Pedro Jimenez, and they're left for 2 years to season. And then after 2 years, they take out the wine. They keep the wine. It's a good deal. And then they send back the empty butts towards the Malaga butts, and then we fill them with our whiskey.
Fantastic.
And really, I suppose the Malaga wine, it's a sweet, fortified wine, and it's really, really distinctive. It's a beautiful wine. Mm-hmm. So let's have a nose. Now, this is 46%, okay? So we'll nose and we'll taste at 46, and we can add a little bit of water if you wish. So initially, for me on the nose, I get lovely exotic fruits. I think it's quite exotic fruits, like peaches. There's a bit of orange peel. There's a hint of maybe citrus. So it's a lovely, bubbly, fruity on the nose initially. And then, as you dig a bit deeper, you get that maybe creme brulee, a little bit of caramel, a little bit of toffee. Mm-hmm. Probably a hint of roasted coffee there as well. And really beautiful on the nose. And there's probably a little bit of spice there, maybe nutmeg and cinnamon coming through as well from the Oloroso sherry. But that sweetness, that sort of honey syrup sweetness coming from the Malaga is just coming through in the nose. Mm-hmm. So we just have a taste. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
For me, the yellow spot is just that luscious mouthfeel. Mm-hmm. Okay, it is a single pot still whiskey, so you have that spiciness there, a little bit of pepper maybe, but it has that spiciness on the taste. But it just fills up the mouth. It's quite creamy. Very creamy. Okay, which you'd expect from a single pot still, but really full on, lots of fruit, and it's really, really delightful. Mm.
Fantastic.
So if you want, maybe just add a little drop of water. Yep. Mm-hmm. At home. Not too much. And again, as Deirdre said earlier on, it just tends to open up the whiskey. And in this particular case, I think it just enhances those fruit notes. I don't know what people think at home, but it just gives that the fruit note even becomes sort of louder and more enhanced.
It's a burst of fruit.
And the peaches even become just lovely. Maybe kiwi.
Touch of banana.
Just a banana and grapefruit, maybe.
Some apricot.
Yeah, apricot. So we taste again.
Kevin, while you're tasting there, we have a question from John Summers. Are the spot whiskies all the same for the first 8 years? And what do you do after? And what you do after defines the colour? It's a good question. Thanks, John. Yeah.
So the spot whiskies, they have, I suppose, the same DNA in the sense that the single pot still whiskey style is the same across the range of pot whiskies, be it green, yellow, blue or red, right? So that's the core DNA. So there's a particular type of distillate style that we use for the spot whiskies. And then where the differences arise really is the type of cask we use. So if you look at yellow spot, as I've mentioned, you have American barrels, you have Oloroso sherry, and you have Malaga. If you go to something like, we'll say, a blue spot, you have American barrels, Oloroso sherry, and then you have Madeira casks. Mm-hmm. If you go to red spot, we introduced Marsala casks. So the differences come really from the different contributions from the different fortified casks that we use from around Europe. And that's how it works.
Brilliant. The same family, just different personalities.
Yeah.
Say.
Yeah. So that's Yellow Spot. So hopefully everybody is enjoying it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Kevin.
So let's move on to the next one, which is Triple Triple.
It's nice to have Jemison feature this evening. And you mentioned actually about the bonders. So back in the day, John Jemison and Son used to only supply whiskey by the barrel to specially, I suppose, appointed bonders. And in Dublin and lots of bars around the country, over the pub sign, the name, you'll see the word bonders.
Bonder, yeah.
And the very first drops, so in 1962, I think, Jemison decided to bottle themselves from the Bow Street Distillery. So I suppose, managing the whole process from grain to glass.
Correct.
And I think that was Crested 10 at the time.
Correct, yeah.
So really nice to have a link here this evening with Jemison.
Yeah, so this Triple Triple, we launched it in, I think it was 2019, as a global travel retail option, which you can get at the airports, etc., when you're heading away on holidays or coming back. It's also available online as well at the moment. But I suppose the thing with Jemison Triple Triple, first of all, let's talk about Jemison Original and the differences between something like this and a single pot still. Jemison is a blend of grain whiskey and pot whiskey. So Deirdre has described, grain whiskey. It comes from a mash bill of maize and malted barley. It's distilled in column stills. It is elegant. It's fine. There's nice floral notes off it. And then you have the pot whiskey, which comes from a cereal mix of malted barley and barley, triple distilled in copper pot stills, and matured in a range of different types of casks. So what Jemison Original is, you have grain and pot, and then you have a contribution of the American barrels, both first fill and refills, and Oloroso sherry casks, first fill and refills. And it all comes together in Jemison Original, and you have this lovely, sweetness, vanilla, toffee, smoothness. Everybody knows Jemison. So here is sort of an extra twist then with Triple Triple. So what we've done is, yes, it's still grain and pot, yes. You still have your American barrels, you still have your Oloroso sherry, but we've added in this extra dimension then of Malaga cask. So Triple Triple, it's triple distilled, and you've 3 cask types, hence the name Triple Triple. So that's the background to Jemison.
Fantastic. And as you mentioned, only available in global travel retail.
Yep.
And we've put it on, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we've put it online on our shop just for the next 7 days.
Good, okay,
Yeah,
good.
There you go.
So just have a nose. So this is a 40% bottle strength, okay? Now, similar to the Yellow Spot, I mean, initially you get that sort of fruit, but I think here it's probably more autumnal fruits coming through as well. You have the kiwi, you have some small amount of peach, but you have plum, you have berry, sort of those autumnal ripe fruits coming through, a little bit of banana as well. Mm-hmm. So the fruit notes are a little bit different. And I do get lots of caramel, probably butterscotch, chocolate, okay? Probably a hint of ground coffee as well. But lovely sweetness, almost a kind of that honey, treacle, syrup note is quite dominant in the nose.
Touch of brown sugar.
Bit of brown sugar, yeah.
Or sugar.
Yeah. So we just have a taste. Sláinte, everybody.
Sláinte.
Okay. Lovely sweetness on the taste. Has lots of mouthfeel. Again, it's quite luscious, similar to the Yellow Spot. Very, but that caramel, toffee, chocolate, creme brulee, biscuity note is coming through. Creamy, yeah, really good. So if people want, they can add a little drop of water.
When you compare it to the likes of Jemison Original then as well, they're both blends, they both have bourbon and sherry casks in the mix. But, when you think of Jemison Original, you think maybe touch more orchard fruits and kind of apple pencil shavings. Yeah. But the inclusion of the Malaga cask in the making of Triple Triple, it's kind of more of you can really describe it as more of a fruit-forward version of Jemison Original. I think it's a kind of a nice way of putting it to try and describe what you're getting with it.
You just get that extra layer of fruit coming through in the nose. Yeah.
And Kevin, when we compare to Yellow Spot, Triple Triple also uses Malaga casks, but they're quite different in terms of taste.
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, first of all, Jemison is a blend, so you have your grain whiskey. I mean, that's one of the key differences. So you have your grain whiskey, which gives that sort of vanilla butterscotch toffee, which Deirdre was talking about earlier on. You have the Oloroso Sherry and you have the Malaga, whereas with the Yellow Spot, it's a single pot still. It's all pot still. You have the 3 types of casks, but I suppose the key difference would be the grain contribution, and you have the age difference then as well.
Ken Flynn tuned in this evening. Hiya, Ken. As a question, how is the wood selection made? Who decides and how?
Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Dave?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So
it's all you, isn't it?
No, I'd like to say so when whiskies are excellent, but it's a team effort. I suppose every brand, every expression we make has a formulation. So when you look at the likes of Redbreast, which we'll talk about in a minute, we know to make Redbreast 12, it's this type of barrel holding this type of spirit for this number of years, married with another type of barrel of another type of spirit for so many years. So you always have a formulation. And that's how you can maintain consistency then with your brand. So if you keep sticking to that same formulation each time, you then make the same style of product in terms of taste and flavour. So that's obviously something that has been passed down, from generation to generation if you're maintaining an existing brand. Billy Lighton obviously would be instrumental, say, in the Redbreast style for, the 12, the 15, 21, you name it. So our job then is to make sure we're sticking to that formulation. But there's quality control as much as anything else. So when the casks come in, they're nosed by the team taking them off the trucks. Every time we're making a batch, myself and Dee will look at samples, sign them off, approve of them, make a little composite compared to the last batch, just to make sure consistency is there. It mightn't always be the exact same, which I like to kind of reinforce, because that shows you that we're making it on a batch-by-batch basis. So you will get subtle nuances and little differences, which is a very natural thing for whiskey. So it kind of keeps it interesting when people look at certain years of Redbreast cask strength, for example, and they'll see the slight differences, and that's all part and parcel of it. But once it's within the ballpark of that flavour. So there's a lot in it, but we decide, I suppose, the cask types, we decide the spirit types, all based on the formulation. But where it gets interesting is when we work on new brands, it's a blank canvas then. So we all work together looking at things, who likes what, who doesn't like what, and does it fit the brand? Is it right for the type of consumer is going to look at that brand? So definitely a team effort.
That must be an exciting part of the job.
It is, yeah. It's you're given an element of free reign and expression. Obviously, it's confined within limitations in terms of how much you can use of different whiskey types and things like that. But there's an element of freedom and kind of an expression, if you will, or freedom of expression to a degree.
Brilliant. And I think we have another question coming in from Owen McGrain. Is the triple the same age profile as Jameson Original?
Yeah, you're going to ask them to do it.
It's ballpark, slightly older. Ballpark, there's some crossover with stock that goes into making of Jameson Original and triple. But there's a few different elements in there in terms of the type of grain, and also the traditional or single pot still whiskey in the Malaga that would be slightly older in age as well. So it's just a few years on average older than Jameson Original, but not by much, because we want to keep the DNA of Jameson in both. So you want to use a bit of crossover from the type of stock you're using in both. But as we said, we're just kind of adding or elevating an element of fruit to it. And that's not just to do with age, it's to do with the types of casks you're using. So we didn't want to create a huge disparity of age on these two, because you might lose the link between them then.
Okay, cheers, Dave. Thanks a million. No, and thanks a million for your question at home. Kevin, thank you very much for that great tasting on Yellow Spot and Triple. Dave, we'll stay with you now for our last tasting of the evening from our first quarterly shipment, the Influence of Spanish Oak, and you're going to taste Redbreast Listowel. Very excited about this.
That's right, John. So, when you talk about Redbreast and the flavours associated with the range of expressions that we do, we always would kind of associate with being a sherry-led style of whiskey, which is very fitting for tonight. We're talking about the influence of Spanish oak and fortified wine casks as well. But the history of Redbreast is somewhat similar to the story with the Mitchells that Kevin was talking about with regards to Yellow Spot, that this stems from a whiskey bonders back in Dublin in the 1800s, W&A Gilby. And at that time, they were in the process also, or in the business rather, of buying spirit in bulk from different distilleries, aging it in their own emptied out wine casks and bottling it themselves. And there would have been a brand at the time they were releasing called W&A, or Castle Grand Liqueur from W&A Gilby. And over time, you might have seen on those labels a stamp or a call out as to where the spirit was from, which would have been J&S, so John Jameson and Son. So they were kind of highlighting to their customers the provenance of the spirit, obviously that they were proud of the fact that they were getting it from the Jameson Distillery. So that practice carried on. And then in around 1912 was when the first reference to the word or the label Redbreast first appeared on the labels. There's a few stories out there as to how that name came about, and I suppose there's one well-known or kind of well-loved story, and that's to do with the chairman at the time, who was a member of the Gilby family, and he was a big bird fancier, ornithologist, and he came up with the idea at the time he wanted to name 3 expressions after 3 birds. And when it was put to the committee, I can imagine if you were a fly on the wall at the time, a lot of eyes going up to heaven, saying, how do we handle this? The decision was to go with one. He wanted to name one after the redbreast, the robin, redbreast. He wanted to call one after the yellowhammer and one after the chaffinch. And it was the robin redbreast that got the call up. Naturally. So that's been on the label ever since. And talking about, bonders and distilleries selling spirit in bulk, that eventually phased out.
Yeah.
And there was actually a period of time where there wasn't any redbreast actually bottled or produced, I think around the early 1990s. So Irish Distillers here in Midleton kind of, took it up again, carried on the legacy, and we've been making it ever since. So when we talk about redbreast, thankfully. There's a lot of relieved people out there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So when you talk about redbreast, as I say, think of a sherry-forward, sherry-led style of whiskey. In particular, Redbreast 12, it's a marriage of whiskies in bourbon and sherry, but it's the sherry style or the sherry influence where we kind of talk about the flavour influence being quite dominant. We talk about dried fruits, raisins, sultanas, prune, fig, and a nutty character. So to kind of elevate that in Redbreast, this is where we come into the world of Redbreast Listowel. So the idea here is that while we've been working for the 4 decades, as Kevin and Paco mentioned with Antonio Paez, while they make our barrels and they store them and season them with Oloroso sherry in their bodegas, they've always been actually sending some of their casks to Bodega Listowel, which is only just down the road from them in Jerez. And that's a huge world-renowned fortified wine producer, one of the world's best, and the amount of accolades they've won is testament to the quality of what they make. And we've always been working with them. We've always been having casks seasoned in their bodegas. So, the idea was, why don't we call out this collaboration and highlight the prowess and the provenance of such good seasoned casks. So in 2016 was when we created Redbreast Listowel. Unfortunately, the head winemaker Manolo Lozano at the time passed away just before the launch, so he wasn't there to see it. But he'd spent time working with Billy on the collaboration and trying to get the flavour profile for what we were looking for right. So what it is, in essence, it's a marriage of casks between 9 and 11 years of age in bourbon and sherry. And what we do is we marry them together. And when casks from Bodegas Listowel arrive over freshly emptied, we fill them and we leave them for roughly a year to finish. So what you're doing is you're taking whiskies that are of age, which have an element of sherry cask influence from that time, and putting a fresh, vibrant wine influence on top of that aged whiskey. So when you look at it and you nose it, and I talk about the dried fruits, you will get that in this, but you'll find that there's an elevated fruit element to it. And we talk about berries. Kevin mentioned autumnal fruits for triple. That's another description that's very relevant for Listowel as well. Jam type of compote, type of berry influence as well. We don't want to forget about the bourbon influence, so there is an element of sweetness in there. But when you talk about the berries, we would consider the fresh element of that coming from just the last 12, 16 months in the Listowel casks. and even a small little touch of licorice in there as well, which is quite nice. Now it's bottled at 46%, so have a taste, see what you think. Let's launch it.
Launch it.
So very rich, very full, almost kind of, there's an element of chewiness in there. There is that pot still spice character we talk about, a little touch of dryness in the aftertaste, which is, we've alluded to with the Spanish oak in terms of their level of tannin, but very rich, long depth of finish, and almost kind of mouth-watering sensation as well towards the end as I'm talking now. So it's a testament to the influence of Spanish oak, testament to the quality of the Oloroso we get in, or that's rather used for the seasoning of the casks. And it's a very rich theme that we're seeing tonight, that influence is very visible in all our expressions, be it grain, blends, or single pot stills as well.
But a really nice mixture within that overall theme of Spanish oak. Dave, thanks a million. We got a couple of questions coming in. First one from Ben Lucy. Not sure where you tuned in, Ben, but thanks for tuning in and writing into us. Why isn't there a cask strength version of the Redbreast 15 and 21 like 12-year-old, and could it be in the pipeline?
It's a very good question. What we've noticed, I think, over the last number of years, kind of across the range of what we do, cask strength versions of what we make is becoming very popular. And I know we have definitely gone to events like Whiskey Live in the past, and we would have shown people the likes of Redbreast Stout at cask strength, as well as Redbreast 21 and others. And the question is always, could we do these at their natural cask strength? The question is, we could do them, and will we? That remains to be seen. It's just, having to worry from a blending point of view. You're always worried about your stock and your management. So maybe if we can do that, we would reduce maybe the volume of what we make at the 40 or the 46%. But I think there's plenty of demand out there for us to ask the team in marketing, could we go ahead with this? Because the proof is in the pudding when we show it to people. Something like this, a cask strength, is very approachable, even at a higher strength.
And Ben Lucy will get the first bottle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once it's produced for sowing the seed.
That's the thing as well, John, is that within some of the ranges that we have, the cask strength offering. So, like for example, cask strength Redbreast 12. Then, if you look at Midleton, you have Midleton Dark Whalelock, which has the cask strength as well. So, within each of the ranges, there is a kind of a cask strength offering. But I suppose Dave is right. It's something maybe for the future. There's a thirst out there for cask strength.
Absolutely.
But then, some people like it at 40% and 46. So there's a range of tastes out there. So you try to match it all.
What's the highest strength we can go up to?
Well, it's if you look at single pot still, it's cast off at 63%. And then over years, it loses strength. So, typically maybe after 10 or 11, 12 years, it's probably down to around 56, 57%, somewhere around that, 58 maybe. So the highest strength, probably the late 50s or something like that. Yeah. And then it drops off as the years because of evaporative losses.
Got lots of people tuned in, lots of great questions.
Good.
Thanks for that, Kevin. John Summers out there. Hi, John, hope you're well. Do the sherry butts come all made up, or are they flat packed? IKEA style, and have to be put together? It's a great question.
Yeah, no, in fact, if you go back probably 40, 50 years ago, the casks delivered from America would have actually come in what we call shook form, flat pack. So they were all, and I suppose the reason for that was, transportation efficiency. You can actually load a lot of flat pack barrels into a container as opposed to whole barrels. But that all changed probably in the 80s and 90s. Again, down to quality. The casks were delivered whole, intact, and basically you had less issues with filling, less issues with quality. So to answer the question there, no, the sherry butts, they come in intact just like this, and we have between 44 and 77 on a container. And they're offloaded like that.
And Ger Buckley and the team all inspect.
Yeah, they're inspected then as they come off. Absolutely. So every single barrel that comes in to Midleton is inspected by a cooper. And these sherry butts, then any fortified wine or wine cask, they're also inspected as well for quality. And there's a significant amount of checking that goes on. Yeah.
I don't
And
think
if any
we'd hear the end of Ger if you need to put them all back together on a daily basis.
We need about 40 jars.
Oh my word! Could you imagine?
40 jars.
Better be careful what I say, but he might be tuned in, and also he's given us use of his space.
Yeah, okay.
Guys, we have another question. Paul Coburn, hi Paul. How many times can you use a barrel? That's a great question. And actually, what do we do with the barrels when we're finished?
Yeah, so typically 3, we use them 3 times. So I think Deirdre explained earlier on, look, if you look at an American barrel, it has already been seasoned with, bourbon in America. So when we take it to Ireland, it's called a B1, it's our first time using it. Then a B2 second and a B3 a third. And then what happens is the contribution of the wood starts to decline significantly after a third fill. And then we basically put them to one side and we sell them off. They go to a number of different uses. For example, our sister company, Havana Club, they would take quite a number of our casks every year for their rum maturation because they're not looking for a significant wood contribution. So the B3s and B4s, they suit them perfectly. Some of the older casks that are sort of maybe in poor condition, they would go to, as planters for, back gardens, absolutely. We also have done work with, making floors, wooden floors from old barrels. So there's lots of different uses. So they really have a long life cycle in terms of sustainability. We get a lot of uses out of them.
Brilliant. Well, that I think wraps our tasting, guys. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of the tasting. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have here, and that you've discovered either a new favourite whiskey or have learned something new about the craft that goes into making our much enjoyed whiskies here at Midleton Distillery. Now, all of the whiskies that we've tasted here this evening are available for you to buy directly, and we would like to offer you, our members, free shipping on any of the bottles tasted tonight, should you wish. All you have to do is pop in the code Barrel Club, so that's all one word, on jamesonwhiskey.com/shop, and we'll have them delivered straight to your door. And that offer is going to be open for about a week or so. And just to say that Triple again will be only available in the airport, but it's available on our shop for the next 7 days or so. I think we're going to end with a question or two. We've got Danny Hines. Hiya, Danny. Hope all is well. Question for the panel. If a friend asked them to recommend one bottle from the Irish Distillers range, what would they recommend? Will we start with you, Deirdre?
This is always a difficult question, but I suppose how I answer it is what I'm enjoying right now and what, after a long week's work, what I would open on a Friday evening. And I'm not just saying it because it's in front of me here, but I do tend to, at the moment, go for a yellow spot. Yeah, it's nice, and it's nice in the summer evenings, so...
I'd probably have to say Midleton Very Rare 21, wouldn't I? But it's my first spot. But there's I'm asked that question quite a lot in terms of, and it's very difficult because, we are all involved in all these whiskies every day, and picking a favourite, they say it's like, picking a favourite in your family. Child. It's very, very difficult. So I'm going to...
That's easy enough.
Well, I don't know about you, John. But I revert, there was a very famous architect from Mitchelstown called Kevin Roach, and he did a lot of work in America. Yeah. And he was often asked the question on various panels and stuff, what's your favourite building? And that's a very difficult one for an architect, as you could imagine, pick your favourite building. And his answer was, it's the one I'm working on now. So what I'd say, it's whatever whiskey I'm drinking now.
I love that.
Okay.
Dave, what's yours?
Again, difficult question, but I suppose given the context of this evening and the close relationship we have with the guys in Spain, they're very close to our hearts as much as they're, we've a working relationship with them, we've a family relationship as well. So for me, the one whiskey I'd always gravitate towards if I'm talking to someone and sharing it, be Redbreast 12.
Yeah, Redbreast 12. Nice. I'd be, a 21 man.
Expensive taste.
It's expensive taste. I just, 12 or 21, it just depends. That's pretty much it. I think we've run out of time. I just want to say a massive thank you to Deirdre, to Kevin and to Dave. As mentioned at the top, You guys are extremely busy at the moment, but to take time out and to join us on our first Barrel Club virtual tasting experience has been great. And a massive thanks to all of you, our members who've tuned in this evening. We hope that you've enjoyed, and that we now need to, we're not finished here, guys. We've got to put the place back for Mr. Buckley in the morning, or he won't give us the space again. And just to say, when we mentioned about the cooperage, as part of your membership, we'd love to invite you to either Jameson Distillery here in Midleton to do our behind-the-scenes tour with our compliments. And you get a peek behind the curtain here, and as part of that, it's a couple of hours long, really great tour and really great experience. You get to pop in here to the cooperage, and if you're really lucky, you might see Mr. Buckley, and he might sign a t-shirt or a barrel head or something for you. And if you can't get down to Cork, we'd love to invite you up to Jameson Distillery in Smithfield in Dublin to do our Jameson Black Barrel blending class that we launched last year. Where you get to blend your own whiskey from start to finish, which is really nice experience. I know you guys have been up, and you get to, as part of the experience, draw and taste whiskey straight from a barrel in Dublin's only live maturation warehouse. So we're going to be in touch in the next couple of weeks about how you can book your ticket. So we hope to see you in person. Now, our next virtual tasting will be in December, and we'll be showcasing the diversity of pot still whiskey, which got a great plug all throughout tonight's tasting. So that promises to be a lovely drop, which will be at your front door for you just in time for Christmas, probably in around the first week in December. And we'll follow up with another virtual tasting with some of the team from Midleton here. I think all that's left for me is to announce the winner. You've got our brand new Method of Madness, launched only last night, not available until the 20th of September. I jotted down, I should say, the correct. So we want to know how many barrels are maturing on site, both here and in Gurney, right now this evening. The correct answer is 1,821,594. And by golly, David McLean, you were close. You were 1.85 million versus 1.82 million. So congratulations, David. We're not sure where you're tuned in the country this evening, but we will touch base with you very soon. We'll make contact with you directly to get that bottle to you.
We promise we won't open it.
We promise we won't open it. We're going to be too busy sweating here trying to get the cooperage back together. Guys, thanks so much again. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody tuned in. We'll be in touch between now and December. We do hope that you get to pop along to Midleton here or to Bow Street. And again, if you want to purchase any of the bottles used, tasted this evening, pop in that code Barrel Club. That's it. Sláinte, good evening. Thanks again. Okay. Have a great weekend. See you soon. Sláinte.